Welcome to the Holistic Career Change Podcast, one-stop shop for everyone feeling stuck in their career and who are looking to identify, change, and succeed at their new fulfilling work. I'm your host, Vilma Oseita. Let's go. Hi everyone, how are you? I've missed you guys, not gonna lie. I was thinking about this the other day actually, and I'm not sure if I have already mentioned this on the podcast, but connecting to people through this platform, through podcasting, I think is a very interesting medium because in a way, it's like having a very one-sided relationship. You talk to yourself, you record talking to yourself, and then you click publish and you release it to the universe. And then sometimes you get some very lovely messages. So I am not complaining. I do get some very heartfelt sharings and thank yous from you. So keep them coming. But it doesn't make it less weird for me. And it definitely takes some getting used to. But today, it's a special one. I have another Career Changer series interview with Jennifer, who is a beautiful and very, very talented soul who, for as long as she could remember herself, was drawn to arts and in particular to painting. Yet, as her life story unfolded, she found herself engaging with the reality of life, raising her family, and essentially somehow, without even noticing, probably was never a conscious decision for her, but she allowed her love for painting to be reduced to a PS in her life, something that she would do only when she had time. Right. And it's a very interesting story, actually, because I was following Jennifer on social media for some time without even knowing that she was a painter. And she had essentially kept that part of her hidden. And then I found that, her account had turned a little bit quiet. And after some time, I think after almost a year, I saw her referring to her new painting account. And once I opened it up, to my surprise, it turned out she had a painting business. Like she was a full-blown painter and the business was booming. She had followers. People are loving her art. And what's even more mind-blowing, it seemed like it all had happened in less than a year. And the way the story unraveled, for the lack of a better word, is nothing short of magical, especially after she made a decision to say yes to her purpose and to her self-expression. So trust me, you will want to listen to this one till the very end. And if you are a budding artist, if you are bursting to express your gift and share your creation with the world, this one is for you because Jennifer shares this beautiful, loving, and encouraging advice on how not to turn your back on your art and how to make it into a living. I don't know who said this, but I could definitely not agree more. Creativity takes courage. And I may even add a lot of courage. And that is also one of the themes that Jennifer and I discuss in this episode. And yet when we embrace it, it really seems to liberate us, to illuminate us, and to lift us. So, without further ado, here's my interview with Jennifer. Enjoy. Hi, everyone. So good to be back. And as always, I'm very excited, but today my excitement level is next level because I have an amazing guest for you with an incredible and I would even say slightly magical story when it comes to her transition and her owning her authenticity and embodying her purpose. So I'm very, very excited to introduce you guys to contemporary painter Jennifer Baker. Jennifer, maybe we could start with just you introducing yourself and telling the listeners more about yourself as much as you want, and then we'll transition into other bits and bobs of your story.
Okay. Hi there. Thanks for having me on, Vilma. I'm excited to tell my story. My name's Jennifer, and I'm a painter now. I've really always been a painter. I picked up a paintbrush from literally as far back as I can remember. I was born and raised in the United States, in Florida. I left Florida to go to art school in New York City when I was 18. because I used my passion and my talent, and also just it was really like a place for me to deal with life. I went to New York City, got my degree. Several years later, after I graduated, I met a man and moved to Italy and got married and lived on the top of a mountain in Italy for several years.
Wow.
Yes, that was a really important part of my story, obviously. And that lasted full time in Italy for 16, 17 years. And now we split our time between the United States and we come back to Italy. We do 6 months in each place. So yeah, that's kind of my geographic story. That's me.
Right. Oh, that's amazing. So you're like the original nomad, right? Like I feel like now it's so popular, but I feel like you're the OG in nomading and traveling.
That's that I was thinking before I was going to speak to you, because a big part of my story with me being an artist was when I came to Italy. It was during the 90s and there was no internet. There was no English speaking television channels. I had a hard time finding a newspaper unless it was, a couple weeks old. It was definitely full immersion. It was a really different experience. And for me, it led to a crisis of who I was in a lot of ways now that I look back on it, which had a lot to do with my path, with my career. So yeah. Yeah.
That's really interesting. But you know what? I mean, Italy is such a like special case because I have one of my best friends. She also married to an Italian and she moved there 5 years ago, but she had the same experience. She lived in a smaller town and she goes like, no one speaks English, or if they do, they
No.
pretend they don't. And, she had to learn the language. She had no other choice.
Oh yeah, it was full immersion. We also literally we moved to the top of a mountain to ran like an Airbnb, not an Airbnb, sorry, a B&B. There was literally no one there who spoke a word of English, and everyone who passed through looked at me like I had just landed from Mars. I mean, it was literally like there's an American person in so it was definitely a different time.
Yeah.
Glad I did it, but
Yeah.
yeah, it was different than today, hugely different.
That's just fascinating. So one of my questions to you was whether you always knew that you wanted to be connected to art, or you found yourself being artistic. So I guess you answered that question, that there's always been a part of you that was very drawn to this world. So how did you end up finding yourself in translation? Because that was also a big part of your life and a big chapter of your life is working with translation.
Yes, I was just thinking that I failed to mention that in my story, because I know your podcast is about changing careers. And I began a freelance translation business living here in Italy. I began the actual business in 1999. I fell into it. It was literally we had left our B&B, and I'd been teaching English. One of the things that happens to quite a lot of expats, I think women in particular, I've got a lot of friends who have had the same experiences. When you move to a foreign country, you really give away, I mean, not, I didn't know that I was doing it, but in a certain sense, I gave away my identity. And when I came, I literally remember the feeling. I was very young. I was 23. I graduated college, university, a couple years before. I was still painting quite a bit. I'd done some traveling in the United States. I'd left New York City. But when I came over here, I I remember feeling like I didn't even know how to dress. I didn't even know like what I wanted to, like what music I wanted to listen to anymore. It felt like my whole being, it was just kind of gone. Which was, now I'm much older. I can look back on that and see it, in a different light. But at the time I was super lost. And so translation just kind of fell on my head. It was something that I was very good picking up the language here. I was fluent very quickly. I'm also a very good writer. So when I started translating, it was literally someone asked me, "Can you translate this for me?" I totally remember the moment. It was a person who I'd met through another person, and I said, "Oh yeah, well, okay, I can give that a try. I have a computer," and I did it, and then I got paid for it. And it was the first time in Italy I'd been paid for something that I did just on my own. We'd always had a family business. I'd had 2 children in the meantime, full-time mom. So it was getting paid for something that I did that had nothing to do with my family here, my husband. And that was in 99, I think. And then it just really blossomed and bloomed. I'm I'm a good marketer. I can really promote myself and market my skills when I'm a translator. I've learned to do it as an artist now, but there was a big disconnect there. And so I built a really great business. I loved it because I was free. It was a good business for me. So that part of it I'm proud of. But my art was just kind of there, but it was really in the background, and it became kind of this closet part of me. I can't quite describe it. I always painted, but I did it after I'd done everything else, meaning, I'd taken care of the kids, I'd taken care of my house, I'd taken care of my work, I'd done all the other things, and then maybe I'd kind of paint, but I'd kind of like not tell anyone I was an artist. I mean, people here were blown away when they learned I was an artist. It was really crazy. I think it's important for people who are artists, any kind of artist, whether it's a painter like me or if you have a passion that fuels you, we we have to learn, we being meaning artists, we have to learn how to self-promote. And I did not know how to do that with my art. And it got to the point where people didn't even know that I was an artist anymore. I was just a translator. I was great promoting that.
There are so many beautiful things that you said. So it almost feels like just life happened to you and you kind of just went with the flow, right? It didn't feel like there was a lot of your say in it. You just kind of like, okay, and you went with it, right? You went.
I was listening actually to one of your podcasts, which I love all of them, and someone was talking about how when they made the decision of what they were going to study, there was kind of a long-term goal in mind, and thinking, well, if I study this or that, in the future, I'll have these kind of opportunities, and maybe I'll do this or that. I've never, ever, ever been that person. I've been the person, I really want to paint. And I won a full scholarship to school, to one of the best art schools in the United States. And I went and painted. But even that school, I was thinking about it this morning before speaking with you, that school was a total creative experience. And I studied with some of the greatest artists of the time. And I really thrived there. I was living in New York City. It was a very creative environment. But no one ever during the 4 years that I was studying talked to me about, what are you going to do with this?
Wow,
How are you going to
really?
live? No one. It was this full on, just a creative craft. Like, here's what I did. Like, I had all of these fabulous professors that were artists, and some of them very well known. And it was all about the process of making art, nothing about living as an artist. And it really fed into the stereotype of the starving artist, right? So that's, you won't be famous till you're dead, or good luck being an artist. You're going to have the day job, So I just took all that in because it was really part of how I was raised as an artist. And so once I finished school, I almost really never considered that I could thrive and make a career from being an artist without huge struggle, huge sacrifice, cutting your ear off, the whole thing. I just really, it was a huge part of the culture. So I think it's probably different now. I hope so, for people studying now. But yeah, that was, so that's why once I started making money and translating, I just couldn't even contemplate how my art could at all be what I did to, live and thrive and take care of myself and my family.
Right.
Yeah.
That's really interesting. I'm listening to you. I really hope that this has changed now. And then the art schools also include modules or support in artists finding the actual I don't know, outlets and the way to monetize their art, because that's really important, right? So I wonder is that in the way that I have pain, how our education system and especially schools, the early years, they don't help the kids and the teenagers to get to know themselves better so that they could then be better equipped and educated how to choose the next step for them, like the next career, like,
Right.
what to study. I don't feel like there's enough support with that. In the same way, like I'm listening to you and I feel the pain of artists where like it's almost like you come in there and you have immersive experience. You can play artist and only just be, involved with what you love doing. And then you're let go. And then you're like, now what? Like,
That's exactly now what? Now what? That's exactly how I felt when I graduated. I was just thinking that's the perfect phrase. I could have put that on my picture when I graduated. I had a couple the way that my school worked, and it still works, is the people that teach there are real artists. They're not just professors. And I had a couple like very well known, hugely successful artists that taught me. And one of them was this really great artist, and he passed away last year. It was very sad. And he sat me down. I was in my fourth year, and he said, Jennifer, I've never said this to anyone actually. So this is on your podcast. He said, Jennifer, I think you're one of the most sophisticated painters here at this school.
wow.
But then there was this but. He said, but I don't know if you'll be painting in 20 years because no one manages to get as far as I've gotten. And like the way he said it, he wasn't being, boasting. He was just saying it would be a miracle if you could, take your God-given talent and your passion. And I mean, painting for me is like life. I feel alive when I do it. It's just, it's why I'm here on this planet.
Mm.
And he said, but the way the world's set up, I don't know, especially because I'm a woman too. That's a whole nother piece of this conversation. And that was really how I left that school. And so, and then I moved to a whole different country, and, it was just this
Yeah.
whole, so yeah.
Wow, that's really, imagine like
Yeah.
leaving an art school with someone telling you that. And clearly, like he was coming from a good place, right? It's almost like a fatherly kind of energy where, like, listen,
Yes.
we're so good, but I'm just worried that this might not be the path because it's so hard out there. It's the Wild West.
Right.
So no wonder
Exactly.
you were lost in not considering this. It's like a very strong limiting belief thrown your way that as we're young and naive, we are like sponges. So we absorb all of that and it becomes part of our programming.
Yes, so true. This, when I look back on it now, I truly hope the world's very different today as far as the art world goes and the art business too than what it was when I finished school. I think it's in many ways today it's much easier. But that fear and that being totally intimidated and feeling like an imposter is still here today for almost every artist that I know. It's very powerful, especially women. So I think that it's something that for I I think what he was saying to me now that I'm much older and can look back on it, was very true, because the odds that an artist can get beyond all of that, it's a huge barrier, are really small, even today. So yeah,
I
he was
wonder,
wise in his own way.
Yeah, I wonder about this imposter syndrome that you said. All of us have it, right? It doesn't really matter which industry you're in or the job that you do. There's always a part of us which is, well, insecure and needs that reassurance. So I guess we're all aware of that. But I feel like with artists, it's even more expressed. And I wonder if that's because art is almost like an expression of yourself, an extension of yourself. So really putting your art out is a very vulnerable thing to do. Like my partner, he does music, and he tells me that there's a very sort of intimate process he goes through when he releases a song. So do you think that's why it's so like hard, and maybe that's why self-promoting is much of a challenge then?
Totally. I was listening to Totally. So years ago when I started translating, I also did some freelance writing, and I wrote a story it was a small journal. It was an art journal, and it was about the feeling of when you show your art for the first time to the wider public, and you literally, it's like you're in your underwear. I mean, it's like those dreams you have that you get up and go to school in your underwear, and you didn't realize you're in your underwear until you get to school, and then everyone's staring at you, kind of thing. But the thing is that, to me, and art, to be successful and to connect to the person who is looking at it or the person that wants to collect it, has to be honest art, and it has to be vulnerable art. It has to be the art that you are in your underwear, literally. So that passage from making it from that place of being totally honest, you you have to just have, I don't, it's courage. I was trying to find the right word. It is courage, because you have to have the courage to put it out in the world and let it go, because beyond, once that moment when it's out in the world, whether it's on Instagram or hanging in someone's home or in a gallery for the first time, or even you're just showing it to your neighbor, right? You have to really, like, that moment when that happens, what happens after that is beyond your control, and you have to be okay with it. And that's huge and hard. And so that's why feeling like an imposter, that whole syndrome, I still have that all the time, especially when I'm pricing my work. When I'm, I'm doing some things this summer that I can't believe I'm doing. I've got a couple pieces in really important shows here in Italy, and part of me thinks, wow, why did, I'll have this moment like, I can't believe they actually accepted me with all those people into that show, Well, yeah, it's definitely there. It's totally there. And it's a male dominated business for sure.
Still
So
is,
that's,
isn't it? Especially in
yes,
Italy, I would
yes.
imagine in Italy, I feel like it's still culturally more patriarchal from my
Oh,
experience, all the
yeah.
times that I've been in Italy, where I'm like, I don't know, I want to stay here for too long.
I know. It's super challenging. I love it here. That's where I am right now. And I literally feel more Italian than American, but that part of it is just infuriating and disgusting and awful. But it does bring out the best in me sometimes, as because I tend to strive and put myself out on a limb that I might not do when I'm in the United States. Actually, my reach in the United States as an artist is nowhere as good as it is here. I have a
Oh,
really
wow.
good public here. Not sure what the dynamics are behind that, but
That's,
yeah.
that's really interesting. So do you have like a practice, or maybe do you have like a tip? I wonder, like, so when I was releasing the podcast, it was also very challenging to me because it's also an extension of me, and I'm sharing sometimes controversial thoughts, and I'm unspoken, and I'm like, I'm opening myself up for criticism, right? And that you never want to be in that place. It's like, it doesn't feel good. So it's almost like I
Hmm.
had to learn how to, like, listen, when I'm in a process of an episode, I'm just going to be in it and in the energy. But once it's published, I'm almost disassociate from it, and I'm like, I'm just going to let it live its life. Listen, I know people will like it, some will don't. It's okay. Like, the baby's born now, I'll let the baby be on its own, and I'm not going to even go and check, right? Like, do you, like,
Right.
how do you work with that?
That's a great story. Um, I one of the decisions that I made, and we haven't talked about how I got back into my business. Like back into art
Yeah.
as being my life. But one of the big decisions I made when that happened was to say yes to everything. Right.
Hmm.
So, meaning anything that came my way that had to do with my art, whether it was an opportunity to show my work, or this podcast, for example, or I've just any anyone who contacted me or anything that happened, even though it put me way outside of my comfort zone, I said, I'm going to say yes, and I'm going to go for it and do it. And it's been very uncomfortable, right? So as you were saying, once I put my art out in the world, whether it's online or physically or even speaking about it like I am now, I really have to let it go. Like I really have to let it go, because I've had a lot of, like, it's not been all roses and perfect. I've had a lot of people say no to me, a lot of people not even answer me. But I've also had a lot of really beautiful things happen, like beautiful things beyond my wildest beliefs. So, but I definitely have to let it go. I can't, yeah, I have to let it go. It's like a child. It's like it has to go live its own life, especially because art is a very, very loaded subject for most people, meaning, especially, I think for younger people and children especially can look at any work of art and just live it and be in it.
Yeah.
And they look at it like looking at a cloud. That's what I say to a lot of people who, especially when I do a show, for example, and I have people come see my work who maybe aren't usually art gallery goers. They're there because they're my husband's cousin or something, right? That's happened. They'll kind of look at my painting and go, "What is it?" you know, and yeah, because it's not a portrait, and so I try to tell people, if you can look at a work of art, like when you look at a flower or look at a cloud, and you know what you like and don't like, or what moves you or speaks to you. So that part of people being in a certain sense intimidated by the whole world of contemporary art also plays a part in me having to let it go, because there are a lot of people who look at it and be like, oh, well, why didn't you paint a house in there or something? I've literally had people say that to me, or what is that? Or what does it mean? So I have to let that go.
Yeah.
Art's just a very loaded area for a lot of people. It can be very intimidating. So
Yeah, I
yeah.
can imagine. Isn't that interesting though? Yeah, I can totally see how people would be like, my mom would be like, well, where's flowers? Why are there no flowers?
Right. Still life,
Is it not
there's that.
finished?
Yes. Perfect.
Yeah.
Yes.
No, so I can, yeah, you're right. So like you just have, okay, so but I got your cue. We need to rewind a little bit because I also want to
Yes. I
kind of
think it'll help people.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. To kind of like spotlight now that part. So you were in translations and you sort of art had become a PS for you, right? Like when you had time in the free time.
Yes.
Did you ever find yourself thinking or believing that it will come back at the forefront at any point, or you didn't even go there?
I had started to go there mentally, I would say, for the last couple of years. Meaning I'd actually started a website. It was not what I have now, but it was actually a blog. Now that I'm thinking about it, it was a blog, but I had started publishing some of the smaller works I was doing, just what I was doing in this blog. I don't know if anyone saw it, but it was the act of me doing that that made it more real to me. I had started just having this kind of like baby pipe dream. My kids finished college. They got out of university, both of them. Um, my business supported them all the way through school. My husband and I both earn the same amount. We've always earned the same amount. So like I I wasn't one of those people who I consider to be very lucky who can say, well, I'm going to go pursue my art because I don't have to pay the bills, right? So
Yeah.
um so I had this kindling happening, but it was definitely in the closet. Like definitely. I remember that blog. I didn't even share it with anyone. I think I was so yeah, I didn't even share it with anyone. But what happened to me, and my translation business was thriving as well. I had really made some important changes and had gotten very specialized in certain fields and had some really great clients, and it was doing really well. Um, and then what happened to me was COVID. It was literally it was just a crash and burn scenario. I can't even, we were in the United States, and, the bulk of my clients for my translation business live in Italy. I have some all around the world, but that's where the bulk live. And so when the first lockdown happened in Italy, which was March of 2020, I was still working on projects that I had, already ongoing. And I hit April, and in April, I had no income, like zero, none. And my husband as well, he was working in a job that got totally locked down, sent home. And so we were both home with no income last April 2020. And I was so terrified, Vilma. It was like the first impact of that experience was terror. It was just terror. So I basically survived April just on terror of not knowing what was going to happen. And it was a very stark contrast for me. My workflow didn't dwindle down. It just stopped.
Yeah.
So it was gone. And then May came around. We came back to Italy, because that's usually when we come back to Italy. And I was on the plane on the long haul flight coming over, and it was kind of the first time it's something about leaving the United States, and we were coming back here. And I gave myself permission to look back on that month of being without income and not doing this job that I had convinced myself I really loved too. Right. And because I had a little bit of not prestige, but I had my place there. I had people respected me, and I was making enough money to live a decent life. And but I look back on it and I said, well, what did I miss about that business? Since it's a whole month I haven't worked, and the only thing I missed was the income. It was like the only thing I missed was the money. That's it. I didn't miss anything about it. It was just, I was mind blown by that.
Wow.
I did not
I
miss
can only
anything.
imagine. That realization is like, what? I've done this for so many years.
Yes. And I've talked myself into liking it, I like it. It's a very cool job actually, but I did not miss sitting at the computer doing that for a second. I missed the money, obviously, but the rest of it, no, I didn't. So fast forward, we get to Italy. It's still, my business is still dead. I'm in Italy, where I have a painting studio. We have a space here I can paint. My paintings are large and they're oils, and I have to have a space, like a physical space, to do them. So I said, well, I'm going to go in the studio. Right. And the next day I was sitting at the lunch table here with my husband. We're having lunch, and someone knocks on the door. I mean, this is what happened to me. This is the big story. I want people, if you're an artist, to listen to the universe talking to you and things coming your way, and listen and say yes. This is the big, this is what I've learned. Sitting at the table, I hear a knock on my door in my house here. I'm in a smallish town, and I open the door, and there's this man standing there, and he looks familiar, but I can't place him. I just, hi, hello, how are you? He said, don't you remember me? And I said, no, I don't. I said, I'm really sorry, I don't. He said, my name's so-and-so, and I saw some of your paintings 20 years ago, 20 years ago. And I saw you walking down the street the other day here in town. And I said to myself, oh, that's that painter. She's American. And I saw her work. Anyway, this guy, he's a very successful sculptor and artist here in this country, but he's also a curator and has a gallery. And he literally knocked on the door, and he looked at me and said, tell me you're still painting. Because he had asked me 20 years prior to do something with him. And I had not been, I don't even remember that, Vilma. That's how, I'd really buried the artist part of me. I'd been too timid, too shy. I had children. They were small at that point, and I hadn't done it. He said, well, here's what I'm going to tell you. If you paint a body of work, I'm going to give you a solo show, because I do remember that you're the greatest painter. He said that to me. And so that just fell on my head right there. And I did it. I painted all summer. I had several other things happen during the summer that were super exciting. I did a couple, like I started publishing my work online. I got on Instagram. Through there, I had several people contact me. I sent a couple of paintings to Florence. I sent 2 others to Greece to do these group shows. But the big one was his. And he curated a beautiful, beautiful show for me. I'm so grateful to this man. And I sold out. It sold
Wow.
out.
How did
Yeah.
that, what was the feeling? I mean, I'm just like mind blown. And that's why I said, like, I feel like it's such a magical story. And I could not agree with you that, we need to follow the universe and, like you say yes to things. And even you agreeing to come on the podcast, you said was one of the things that you committed to say yes.
Yes.
That was a good
Yeah.
timing for me to ask you. But how did it feel like? I wonder what was the state that you were in during that summer when you were prepping for that like show? Like, were you believing that it's gonna happen? Were you still in denial? Like, do you remember what was that summer like?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Okay. So I went into the zone. I went into this space that's my studio, and now it's like a nice studio space. It was kind of a garagey thing when I did it last year. And I literally I started painting and I forgot the show, meaning I wasn't painting for the show anymore. I was painting. I was so in my element. I was so totally fulfilled every day from the morning to the evening that I couldn't even, I I was like back to my 20-year-old self painting again, but without all the 20-year-old angst and like being, I don't know about you, but when I was in my 20s, I was pretty tormented most of the time. So I literally could see this new translation of myself at the age I am now and everything I've been through and done in my life, like come onto the canvas and really just speak. I had a very clear voice with my art. It was a really great summer, and I was not thinking at all about the show. Really, I was mostly just like fallen into that part of myself. It was really a big life change. It was beautiful. It was really good. And then once we got towards the end of the summer, I had this very large, important body of work too. I'm a large painter too. I mean, that's something that that artists, if you are a large painter or sculptor or whatever it is, try to find some way to do it. And I do know how hard that is, but try to find the physical space and materials and capacity to do it. Um, I let myself do that. I made a lot of very large works. And then when I called the curator, I called him in like early September and I said, hey, okay, come on over and see what I've done. Right. And he
Mm.
came over and it was just this total, he was super thrilled. But I still wasn't quite, it was like I couldn't believe I was going to actually have this show. I mean, to answer your question, I couldn't quite get my head around it. I hadn't been in his gallery yet, physically been there. And so once he came and then he took me to his gallery and it was this beautiful it was on 2 levels and it was gorgeous. And he curated it in the most amazing way. We had just started, galleries were hit so hard by COVID and
Mm.
all over the world. Most of them were closed. This was his first show after being closed for a long time.
Mm.
And it was difficult to do because we had to do like temperature controls and all that stuff. And I thought when he curated it and he did the press and everything, I thought, I'm just glad it happened. I don't have
Oh,
expectations of even anyone coming. It's like a weird time in life, right?
yeah.
Yeah, it was but I felt this thrill that I was doing it and it was close to my hometown and people here were like, you mean Jennifer's an artist? I had no idea she was an artist. Like people didn't know. And there was all this press on it and everything. Cause he's a kind of a big deal, this guy.
Mm.
Um, and so once I walked into the show, like when we actually finally did the opening, that was the only moment I let myself believe that it was going to go beyond this man this curator like loving my work and putting it on his walls and making it look beautiful, right? Then there were
Yeah.
all these people there. A lot of people came. We had to like time people's entrance and stuff because of COVID. And
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay.
yeah.
I thought it was just because there are so many of them. Yeah, like
No, we had
you
to
have
do
10
this like
minutes.
it was all yeah, no, we had to like time people, but it was just huge success. And so I was already really happy, Vilma, with that. I couldn't believe
Mm.
I still, when I talk about it, I just want to cry. I was like, but then I started selling, and that was really, yeah, yeah, that's a whole nother chapter. That's a whole nother chapter. But then I started selling.
Mm.
And I
Yeah.
started selling online as well. Like the big sales, the first sales I got were at that show, obviously. Um, Showing through galleries is really hard, and most galleries take a huge commission cut. This person didn't, and I'm really super grateful, but most of them take 50%. There's a whole system you have to get into the
Wow.
galleries. That's a whole nother conversation. But then I started selling, like once I sold through the show, I really got a lot more exposure. Also, because I just really went for it and started sharing everything I did with my art. Um, I got a big following on Instagram, and then I started selling through Instagram to strangers. I mean, and like big investment pieces people were buying. I couldn't believe it.
Wow.
Um,
So you were doing, so let me just kind of just like expand here. So basically you were selling pretty well on Instagram. So what did that growing your follower journey look like? Was it just you kind of doing the stories, letting them in behind the scenes, showing your artwork? Like what was it like? Just so people maybe could be inspired.
yeah, yeah, that part is really important. If there are other artists listening to me, it can be very intimidating, but it's important. I started my account. I actually looked this morning because I was curious. I started my account last July, so it's not even been a year.
See, this is what's the
And
most mesmerizing thing for me. This has happened in less than a year. Like all of the story that you're telling me, I'm like, I cannot believe that. Like
I
this
know.
time last year, you were still like, what am I doing with my life? Okay, maybe I'll paint a little, right? Like, and there you
Right.
are.
Yeah, I know. I know. I actually looked at that this morning because I wanted to kind of figure out when that happened, and I thought it had been a year already. It was July that I started my account.
Mm.
So I started my account because number one, I was getting inspired looking at other people's art online, right? And I don't think it's easy for anyone, any of the artists, because there's an artist, what I want to say, like an artist community that shares a lot of art because it's a visual medium. Instagram is perfect for artists, right? Because it's all about what you're seeing. So I'd been inspired by a lot of people, and there are a lot of artists super successful, but I know it's never easy to share, even no matter how successful you are. So I thought, well, I have to do this. This is one other thing I have to say yes and get my head around it and go for it, because I'm not 20 anymore. I can't hide in the closet, and when I'm painting, I'm alive. So if I'm here to be alive and to share my gifts on this planet, I have to go for it, you know? I've also gotten into a place in my life where I don't, you can say what you want to me. I'll get some rejection. I'm going to get over it. I've been through a lot of stuff, and I'm going to get over it. So, because every time you get rejected, I think we choose to let that in, keep that like as a keepsake. When someone says something bad to you, you really remember it, right? I mean, you remember that. You remember the sound of their voice. You remember what they said. You remember the whole thing. Someone says something lovely to you and wonderful, you kind of forget the next day.
Yeah.
And that's a choice. I said, I have to, make a choice to really go on what I'm doing. And when I get someone who's moved and touched and willing to pay money for my art, I have to really say, wow, okay, that's
Yeah.
that's cool. And I have to keep going. So I went on Instagram. I made a lot of mistakes. So if there's anyone listening who's trying to figure it out, just keep going. And it's a very powerful medium. It's free, which is a big deal. And you really have to it's kind of like what I was saying earlier in our conversation. You have to be really honest. Like you can't, I really feel like people know if you're not being honest with what you're making, what you're saying, and what you're putting out there. It just won't work if not. And sometimes it's ugly and shitty art. I mean, really, that's part of the art experience. Any artist can tell you that. So
yeah.
yeah.
I agree with you. Like you just have, I feel like we underestimate just how intuitive people are. And even the ones who would not say like, I'm so intuitive, right? They still sense the energy, right? So if we are not coming
Exactly.
from an authentic place, whether you're an artist, whether you're a coach like me, they sense that, and that is off-putting to them.
Totally.
Right. So then,
Yeah, totally.
or could they get confused because like there's certain energy, but the words do not match the energy. And then you have confused mind. Confused mind never buys. So then that's when you have
Exactly.
those artists who are like, well, I don't know why I'm not selling or whatever. Right. So I think that could be it. That missing piece is just that true authenticity.
Yeah, and it's a huge platea. There's so much happening on Instagram as far as art goes that it's important to really be yourself because you are the only you. I mean, it's so cheesy, but it's true. And so what makes you unique in your art and in your person is the only thing that's going to make you stand out in that huge massive art that's on Instagram. It's really huge. And so I had the experience of my account, it's grew very organically and slowly. And, but I kept going also because I enjoyed it. I started to really like the feeling of putting out what I was doing into not just people physically seeing my work, which is always the best. That's what I like, but putting it out. I also linked to my Facebook account, and I had a Facebook account. I still have the same account. It's got like 200 followers. I know everyone on there. It's not like, it's not a big account, but I started to show people in my life what I was doing too, which opened up a huge, it opened up a lot of doors. I got a lot of commissions that way. I sold to a lot of people I know, which I could not even believe. Vilma was like, really? I had no idea you love my work. I had no idea. Well, of course I didn't know because I wasn't showing it to you. I was so that part, but on Instagram, if any artists are, like I said, you have to be really honest with it. You have to be really consistent. You also have to show yourself and not just your art. And
Yeah. They want to
that's
see the
super
face.
hard.
Yes.
They want to
Isn't
see
it?
you.
Yeah.
Yes, it's very hard. It's not natural to any of us. I mean, unless we're an actress or something. I have no idea. For me, it was super hard. Someone told me that. Someone who I really respect, who has a huge following and sells art like for 3 times the prices I sell. She said, you have to show you, like get your face, get in there. They're not just buying the art, they're really buying the artist and they want to know you. So then I sold one of the first sales I had on Instagram was a very large, very important painting that was actually part of my show here. And it sold to someone that lives in Tuscany. I don't know him personally. And he literally saw one of my images on Instagram and contacted me and said, how can I buy this painting? And he bought this painting and set it up in a beautiful villa in Tuscany.
Oh,
So
wow. That's a good place to live for a painting, right? Aren't you happy for your painting?
yes.
He lives a good life.
I'm so happy for all my paintings. I've sold a lot and they've found the most beautiful homes. And I feel like I feel like I'm really adding value to people's lives and to the world now. Whereas
Yeah.
before I was just kind of cruising, surviving, let's pay the
Yeah.
kids college tuition. And, so yeah, it's
Well,
been
that's
a
really
really cool
interesting.
journey.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And that was like one of the questions I wanted to ask you is because there are quite a few people that I meet and they're listening, still feel like I feel like your story was like you were cruising, but at the same time, you weren't really like it wasn't like awful, right? You loved the lifestyle that this career provided to you. I guess it enabled this lifestyle. So I guess you kind of overlooked, the fulfillment aspect of it, I guess, somehow. But there are also a lot
Mm.
of people who are so unhappy and they get physically ill, and they feel unfulfilled, and they feel extremely directionless, and they're stuck. And there are a lot of people who don't have that knowing of what they're supposed to be doing, but they feel like there is something for them. And I feel like that causes a lot of anxiety and suffering for them. And
Yes.
I meet those, and they sometimes like my life, I changed my life around, and then I had a career change as well. And I'm like, you guys, like, life is actually magical. Like, you guys, life on the other side, when you live your purpose, is like, like butterflies. And I mean, yes, you do have hard days, but you meet those hard days and hardships with such a different energy when you are on your path, right? And so I wanted to ask you, now that you live this life, like, what is it like to live your purpose? Like, what is it like to be embodying your true self?
I can't even describe it. It is that's why I spoke in the first part of this podcast about this young woman, girl who moved to Italy, and I didn't know who I was. Like, literally, I had come over here and I had left everything I knew, and I just forgot how to do anything. It's like people here literally started calling me Jenny because it was harder for them to say Jennifer. And all my life up to that point, I hadn't ever wanted to be a Jenny, ever. And people here called me Jenny, and I let them do it. It was this moment. And so when I compare that to now, I really, I can't quite find the words to describe my total fulfillment at what I'm doing right now. And it's not, I have no assurances about my income or my financial situation with it, or so many parts of it. I still, that's not, but it doesn't matter. I really believe it doesn't matter, because I have a really firm belief that I have found my place in this world, and I've come back to it. I mean, my story's a little different because I've come back to it, and I've let it in, and I've like opened that door to that secret garden that I've always had. That was who I was, who I am. But I just shut the door for a while. Life happened. I had children. I had to pay all these bills. All these things happened. So I do believe that if there are creatives or artists that are listening, or even other people, like you said, who feel lost, I really, and this is my belief based on 50 years on this planet and the way my life has gone, is that we have to listen. We have to listen to what's happening in our minds, but especially in the universe and what's coming our way. Because when I spent that month with no income and thought my life was ending, I was not having a joy moment at all. I was so, talk about anxiety and insomnia and all of it. I mean, oh, wow. I don't have a big cushion to land on anywhere, or a family that I can, so that was not, that was not a spiritual moment. But in the end, it actually was, because I just really decided that I was going to wake up in the morning and do the day, and I was going to say yes. You have to say yes. It's so scary to say yes to something. Yeah. It really is. It's not the big, like, oh, happy moment. It's super scary. Yes. So anyway, to answer your question, I can't believe like what I do now. I just can't believe it. I'm so thrilled and happy, and I'm this natural, like, in the studio artist. I like to just, the smell of it gets me excited when I walk in there. That's like how it is. So yeah.
I love that.
Very wonderful.
Yeah, I think that's exactly what it is like, you can't believe it's your life. And your story kind of made me think of that cheesy saying, which, when sometimes you think that life is falling apart, but actually it's just falling into places. But when it's falling apart, it's very easy to like become one with it and think that this is going to be your reality.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I also just gave myself huge permission to fail. I think people need to do that. Right. So, and obviously I get it. If anyone's listening and saying, I can't fail, I have a family. I so get that. Believe me. But this came around to me at a point in my life where I said, okay, if I fail, meaning I totally fail, I can't pay the bills. If I fail, what's the worst that's going to happen to me? It'll be me failing. I'm not going to like let anyone down. It was a perfect time for this to happen to me. My kids are on their own. They're okay. But I really did give myself big permission to fail. And I said, if I totally fail, I'll just go back, which I didn't, and I didn't go back, but we have to give ourselves permission and say, when you can, it's a delicate balance. I don't want any artists listening to me to buy into the starving artist myth. It's a myth. It's a stereotype. It's total BS, and it's not real. People will be willing to invest and pay and buy your work if it adds value and meaning to their lives. It's important to remember that. I could go on and on about that. That's a whole nother podcast.
Yeah, I know, but I think it's a very important topic. So I love what you said that. I think everyone should tattoo that if you're an artist, that people are willing to pay for art. Like, because at the end of the day, I feel like, and what you were talking about art and the way people perceive it and connect to it, it makes me think that, people may not remember the exact maybe details of the painting, or they don't remember the exact words that people tell them, but they will always remember how they were feeling when they were exposed to like that piece of art. And I feel like that's what art is, right? Like it's about how you feel when you're around it, and you want to surround yourself with good and inspiring feeling things and people. And I think it's just such a big part of our existence, art in general. But yeah, so you just got me sort of dreaming and thinking about that, because I'm not that familiar with the art world, but I sense it, like I get it. But talking about the finance bit, I really wanted to also, in one of the last segments, also to ask you about stability and finance in the fairs, because one of the main concerns I get when I start working with people who want to change careers is always that, survival, financial status. And they are very, very scared. They think that it's doom or gloom. They think like, listen, I either change career, and if I fail, I'm going to die, right? They forget that they can come back to what they're already doing. And it's, you can always go back to the skill set that you have and you've been using up until now, right?
Exactly.
But also is like that financial security, that fear of not having money is so paralyzing that I feel like a lot of artists may be like closing that part within themselves, thinking that is just like a waste of time. I'm never going to make it. Like, can you extend like more advice? Can you offer some more? I know that you touched upon it just now, but like, what else can we share with them to like inspire them and remind them that it's possible, and you're an example that is possible?
Yeah, that's a huge, huge part of this whole equation. I'm thinking, I don't know if I can give advice as much as I can empathize and truly relate to anyone who's feeling that pressure. I've felt that pressure my entire life. Since I left home, I've literally felt that pressure. One thing I can say is that if you are called to create, okay, whether it's art or music or writing, I think that it is important that you give yourself license and time and a certain amount of permission to do that. Even if you have a different career, different paying job, the pay the bill job, but go ahead and carve out space and time, make it a priority, whether it's 1 hour a week or 1 hour a day or whatever it is, to like literally make it a priority for your personal well-being. First of all, I think that's huge, because I don't know about anyone else, but when I go in my studio, I'm literally working through every trauma I've ever been through. I'm working through every bad dream I've ever had. I'm working through every joy I've ever experienced. It's literally part of how I survive on this planet. So that's the first piece. And then the financial piece to me is a decision that if it doesn't work, I can go back, or I can go work at the supermarket. I mean, literally, I gave myself a bunch of, options. I said, well, if this, because what happened in my other business was also COVID, and that business really literally got killed by COVID. So I said, I am a resourceful person, and I can go and do, if I get backed up in a corner, I can go, because I can go make things work somehow, right? But I also had to say to myself that my fear of it not working can't stop me from trying. I mean, I think a lot of people say, "Oh gosh, I'll just never be able to make any money or do anything with my art, so I'm just not going to try." That's the place that really you don't want to go to. You can try on a small scale first. You can try on a large scale, but you have to get over that hurdle and try and learn. There's a lot of learning that goes into learning how this market works, how to price your paintings, how the whole thing. There's a lot of business to be learned here too. So I just don't want people to give up on what fuels their heart because of the fear that it won't work. You have to try. I don't
Yeah.
know. I hope that. So
Yeah,
yeah.
no, it does. It does. It's just kind of not leaving it dormant, because I think there is a reason why calling or purpose, why it's called calling, because it's always calling you. It will never not call you,
Mm, that's
right?
beautiful. Yeah, that's beautiful thing you just said. That's so true. Yes, it was always there. Always, constantly. I would walk down the street sometimes and I'd smell turpentine for some reason. Somebody's using it, and it would just flood like the joy of how I feel being in an art studio. And I would think, God, I would really like to be doing that right now. And
Mm.
now I am. But for many years I didn't. So I just want people to give themselves, anyone listening, if you're creative, do it somehow. You don't have to think of it being your full-time career right now. You don't have to think of it paying all your bills right now. You don't have to think of it making you famous or making you however many followers, whatever. You have to just do it. And then the process takes over, and it will take you where it needs to
Yeah.
take you.
It always takes you places. And also, I wanted to ask you, just to wrap up, about that important piece about self-promotion. I guess we kind of started in a way
Mm.
with it, and I want to kind of expand on it a little bit more. Um, like, I think the saying that I found when I was kind of preparing for this episode is that a lot of artists say that, you need to put in as much time and energy into self-promotion as you put it into your art. Would you agree with that?
Oh, that's a great question. For me, self-promotion with my art was the biggest challenge that I faced when I started. Um, because literally that curator knocking on my door, I don't know if that hadn't happened to me, if everything else would have happened after that. It was like a series of, cause and effect. Um, I think that you have to get really uncomfortable. That's what I think, as far as because I could self promote really well my translation business. I had this perfect website. I mean, I still have it. It's all sitting there, but I could really sell myself in that role, because that role wasn't my most inner, authentic, true self. And I'm not knocking it. It was a job and a career and a business, but my art is literally me, right? So um, learning to self promote my art was the hardest part of it. I, but I made a decision one day that I was going to do it, because I decided, what's the worst that can happen to me? I can get rejected. And I thought, well, what happens when I get rejected? Nothing. You have to decide that that's okay, right? I mean, that's a big deal, because the fear of rejection is way worse than the actual rejection, I feel like.
Always.
So,
Yeah.
yeah, it's way worse. I've been rejected a lot over the past year. I mean, um, so, and then I decided that I wanted to learn how to do it. So by that, I went online and I looked at people who I thought were doing a great job and looked what they were doing. And there are a lot of people that teach how to do it. Um, and I got as much information, education, and training as I could to, learn how to actually, because art, the absolute best way to to be with my art and experience it and want to buy it and collect it is to see it, but to see it in person. And that's pretty rare, especially in this last year of COVID. It was very hard to do that. So I had to learn how to photograph. I had to learn a bunch of stuff. It's not always, so I think as far as the time though, when you're saying half and half, I think at the beginning, that's what it was for me. It's way less now. I'm much more in my studio creating than I am doing that part because I've kind of got a system down, but it took me a while. It took me a while to get that system going. And I do use like tips from my old business where I was very organized and had everything, planned and calendar. And is I do block off time for certain things and I use all of my web skills that I got from my old business. I can use them now for my website now and to promote online. I can write pretty well, so I use that skill. But it's not half and half anymore. At the beginning, it was like, oh, Vilma, it was like 25% creating, 75% figuring out what to do next. So yeah, it just. Yeah.
Wow. I guess that's the bit that's missing because we have that like romantic illusion of what an artist is doing. So they're always in the studio and, kind of creative process. But really the reality of things is that it looks at the beginning, like you say, it looks a little different. And I totally agree. It's all about getting over the fear of rejection. And I don't think we can ever get over it. I think we can just learn how to accept it and expect for it to happen. Right.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Totally.
So if there's I always say that if there's nothing you're unwilling to feel, there will be nothing that you will be unwilling to do. Because really all we're trying to avoid is not feel good at the end of the day.
Exactly. That's a great way to look at it. Perfect. I also feel like, it's also a matter of the more you do it, the easier it gets. I mean, it's very cliche, but it's true. Especially with my art. The more that I've had exposure, and so the wider my audience gets, actually the wider my audience gets, the more positive reactions I get, but also the more negative. It's just part of the game, or people who don't understand, or people who are put off, or people. Yeah. So because the wider the audience, the more people are coming in. And I've just learned to be okay with it. I feel really at peace with that part. I obviously want to make a living and have value be placed on what I do, but I also just want to do it. It's like the actual experience of making it and doing it. And I mean, my own home is filled with my own paintings, and it feels good. So, if I could just kind of have that be the part that drives what I'm doing, the rest of it can't really get under my skin quite as much. So, yeah.
Yeah, I love that sharing. I feel like even if you look at the most iconic brands, because you're a brand, right? Like your paintings have certain pattern, right? You have a style, it's recognizable. So I think if you look at the most iconic brands, they are the ones who really attract their people, but also really repel and annoy some other people, right? They are so
exactly
specific, and actually it's a good thing to repel people because these are not your people and you want to attract your people. So the more we step into more of that self-expression and authenticity, the more likely we are to attract our people and repel those who don't need to be in this space.
That is so amazing. That's so exact. I was just, that's so true. I was thinking what you were saying, even with different paintings that I've done, I've had a few paintings over the last year, some larger important paintings that were, for some reason, unbeknownst to me, I have no idea, but men loved them, right? Men.
That is so bizarre.
Yeah. No idea why, but there were certain paintings that men were very drawn to that were purchased by men. And because I think probably 70% of my collectors are female. I'm thinking most of them are women. I mean, not on a huge scale, but I also have a lot of women followers, women artists follow me. But we don't know when we put something out into the world, what it is, what that magic, there's this like key inside of it. Someone can turn the key and it just turns them on and they can see it. We don't know when that's going to happen. We seriously have no idea. We have to be okay with whatever happens when we put it out. It's a huge mystery to me. So yeah.
It is, isn't it? I was just thinking about it. Yeah, I totally agree with you. It's just like, you never really know. And then especially sometimes it happens. Like I had that one episode where I was crying and snorting and I decided to put it out there. I'm like, whatever, like, I don't care anymore. And that was like the most downloaded episode ever. Still to this day, it gets so many downloads. And I'm like, what? I wasn't sharing much. I was crying. I was being vulnerable. I was not being professional. I had so much judgment upon myself. And then I feel like at first, like my mind wanted to grab it and be like, how can I reproduce that? What did I do in there? Like I wanted to analyze it. Right. Like, and then I was like, you know what? I won't, because that's the magic of it. We don't know. Right.
That's exactly right. And that's the huge artist trap. Any artist listening to me, if you make a piece of your art and it connects hugely with people and it's got that magic, you cannot make that art again. I'm just saying, you can't reproduce it. You can make another one that does that, but you'll never recreate that one. There's definitely some magic there to be had. Yeah.
I love that. Okay. Well, it was so amazing to have you on, and thank you for opening up the doors and the windows to your life and your story. I really think it's going to be so inspirational, especially to those budding artists or those who have fears about stepping out of the artist closet. And to wrap up, maybe you can just share with where people can find more about you, your Instagram handle, your website, anything else where, if those who want to check out your work or find out more about you.
Okay, great. Yeah, it was a total pleasure doing this. It was very good for me. This was one of those times when I needed to say yes and talk about my artist self. So thank you. That was great. I have a website, jenniferbakerart.com. My Instagram handle is Jennifer Baker Paintings. And you can find me both places. And that's it right there. I'm doing some exciting things this summer in Italy, which I'll be posting on both accounts. My work is all for sale through my website. I ship worldwide. I also love to if anyone has a question about anything, you can DM me or email me. I go that way too. And I talk to people about what they need in their homes, and I work on commission too. So yeah, that's about it.
Great. Thank you so much. I'm going to add those to the show notes as well, to the episode notes. So in case you guys want to check out and click on them, it's going to be easier. And thank you so much. It was such an honor. Oh my God. I feel like every time I have like a career changer, even though yours was like more, I guess, like a more mellow career change, more romantic career change, or return to your truth. I almost like, oh my God, I want to have like another like recording like a few years in or after a year to like check in and see how.
Wow. That would be great. I would love that. Yeah. Me too.
Yeah. So yeah. Okay. So thank you so much, and wishing you all the best with your beautiful art. I think it's so gorgeous and magical. I'm a fan of such art, and it was an honor to have you, and we'll connect soon.
Thank you, Vilma. This was great. Thank you.
Bye. If you enjoy this content, make sure you subscribe and leave a short review to help me share the podcast with the current and future career changers. I'm on a mission to remove overwhelm and drama from career transitions, and your interaction with my content can help me immensely to spread my message. Thank you from the bottom of my heart.